I'd like to call this meeting of the Board of Education to order. This is a two-part meeting tonight. We'll have a budget hearing initially, where there will be a presentation on the budget, and then there will be opportunity for public discussion and questions, and then we'll move into our formal agenda with the adoption of the agenda. But before we start, could you please join me with the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This is Wetmore Chase. I should say, as we start this, we did, we presented the budget earlier at a meeting, and we did encourage comments at that point. This is a state mandated requirement that we have a budget hearing. In a word, it's a little asinine, in that it's a week before. We've published everything on the budget. We've adopted a budget. The state requires us to have this hearing immediately before we go to vote. So we're doing that tonight. And we welcome any questions or comments, because the only way we can be successful is getting the word out.
Good evening. As we start putting the budget together, the first thing that we do is we put together some assumptions and expectations. Under the key components, value add is always one of the driving forces. Does the additional cost actually add value to the program or operations that we're looking at? Cost effectiveness, kind of the obvious. Are we strategically using resources that make us more effective and more efficient? Tax impact sensitivity, a number of factors go into that, so we always look at tax sensitivity as well. Under value added, does it help us reach our goals? Does it address academic capacity? We know class size is always a big topic of conversation and a concern. Our needs, does it address our needs of academic supports and interventions? And does it provide us academic rigor? Course options, continuing pathways to graduation. Additional operational cost drivers. For example, we know we have large bubbles in our middle and high school enrollments. Those are issues we need to address and ensure we address effectively. We've had disenrollment issues in certain areas. More students want to take courses than we actually have space for. That's a concern. IPAC makes recommendations on necessary course offerings. We also take that into consideration. Under cost effectiveness, as I said, doing things more effectively and efficiently. We just did this big wireless project. We want to make sure that we're using that to its fullest extent possible. And are we able to better address operational needs and improve instruction? Strategic repurposing of resources, we've talked about time and again. We find a lot of different ways to save money. Are there better ways that we can invest those funds to meet district goals? And of course, we're always looking at preserving staffing via negotiations and other collective bargaining agreements. Cost drivers continue as in mandated changes. Every year there seems to be some new ones. English as new language learners is one that we're addressing this year. Everyone's aware of the Common Core assessments and the new benchmarks for the Regents Math and ELA that's coming in 2018 and 2022. We also have determined that there's some student mental health issues that we'd like to address this year. We're partnering with some area facilities to do that on site. And we also know that safety of our facilities and facilities improvements are another big concern. We've seen a lot of evidence of that, some of that happening in some of our buildings, and we want to continue that. One of the operational cost drivers we've dealt with a lot in the previous years has been the double-digit increases in retirement costs, both for teachers' retirement and employees' retirement systems. This year, I'm happy to say the mandated cost is actually a reduction that we're seeing this year. So we are seeing this as a repurposing opportunity. One of the opportunities that we look at, which is one of our big cost drivers throughout the budget, is employee salaries and benefits. This year, we're adding 18.45 FTEs, instructional FTEs to the budget, as well as 1 technical FTE. You can see the breakdown. I won't necessarily go through them. Broken down between elementary, middle school, and high school. And we're also addressing some coaching aspects of things that the league is now starting to look at expanding upon. Other additional operational adds, IMS is continuing to deploy devices throughout both the high school, secondary, and elementary schools, 800 Chromebooks at the secondary level, 350 iPads at the elementary level, as well as replacing a number of desktops and laptops across the district. I won't necessarily go through all of these and just highlight some. Additional library needs at the elementary schools, that's been a consistent need across all the elementaries. We've addressed that this year. Payment for all 10th and 11th graders to take the PSAT exams. This will be given during the school day, and it provides an opportunity for students to take PSATs that may have never thought of taking the PSATs before. Continuing on, we talked about the mental health services. We're partnering with one of the facilities in the area. We're adding some additional counselor days, both at the high school and the middle school during the summer. Another big cost driver is the health insurance. Our budget actually is increasing just over 6%, even though we expect that our rates are going to be double-digit increases again this next year. The Affordable Care Act is a little bit hard to predict. All of the carriers, I think if you read the papers, you see most of them are having difficulty maintaining profits or good financial numbers. So we're watching that very carefully and trying to manage that as much as possible. We're adding transfers to capital funds because we see that there's an increasing need to update our facilities, in addition to ongoing paving, roof replacement, asbestos abatement, and some of those things. Additional transportation costs, we've seen a lot of efficiencies in that area, and we're also using some of the savings towards reinvesting in GPS and some of the security camera issues. Along with that, in the buildings, we're also dealing with some security issues, really expanding upon some of the networking strategies we put in place with security cameras and pin pad entries to some of our main entrances. The last item on that page is additional training days to move from finance manager to WinCap. This one is particularly important to us. It is our software that we manage both our human resources and our financial database. So we think that that's a very good investment and will be a good tool for us going forward. Now I'd like to look at some of the strategic reductions. Again, not all of them, but worthy of highlighting. The special ed area, we're able to see some savings of $120,000, reflects some of the stabilization we are seeing in some of our outside private placements. Again, I mentioned transportation, some reductions there. We're also this year going to be leasing some of our copiers through BOCES. This actually reduces our budgets because when we expend through BOCES, we get 60% back in the following year for BOCES aid. So we expect to save about $25,000 excluding BOCES aid. So we think it's a good use of funds going forward. Then just to kind of go through some of the line items, I won't go through every single one, but the first, I'm sorry.
The bottom line. That's very good. Very quick thinking, Bill.
Obviously, the top two items that we talk about every year comprises about 80% of our budget, and that's salaries and benefits. You can see that salaries will be increasing based on our union contracts. Fringe benefits this year is actually decreasing. We talked about the retirement costs going down. We've leveraged some of that, knowing that our health insurance costs are going up. So we're seeing a net increase between those two line items. The other line items, as you can see as we scroll through, not terribly significant dollars in comparison to the salary and benefits. I did want to talk about transfers to other funds. That's increasing somewhat this year. Part of that is our increase in debt service. We know that we are peaking this year. It was last year and this year. I think next year we might see ourselves starting to go down a little bit. But that's our mortgage payment, so to speak. So we are addressing that need in this year's budget. We also have some additional capital needs, and we've increased our transfer to the capital funds so that we can address some of our building needs that are piling up. In total, our budget is increasing $2.7 million, or 1.72%. As we look at the comparison to the 5-year average of 1.67, we're hovering right in that same area, but that gives you a little history there. As we look at the 3-part budget between the administrative program and capital, these are allocations that the state makes us maintain, but you can see we've maintained a very stable allocation to all of those 3 areas. The pie chart, again, the big items here, instructional, non-instructional, and benefits again, but it gives you a more visual of the breakdown of our budget. The external revenue drivers, we've talked about costs, so talking about the external revenue drivers, state aid is always the big one. We've actually seen reductions in state aid. We're starting to see some uptick in state aid, although still not necessarily eliminating the gap elimination adjustment, which is a very large component of the state aid package. We also considered the tax impact of any of our proposals. Again, a lot of things weigh on that, from the tax cap calculation that has many factors involved in that. Our property full valuation that we calculate in the summer, we're fortunate in this area. We do see some growth. It's been relatively steady, not great, but we've not seen downturns where some areas have. And coming this next year as part of the tax cap calculation, there's also a tax freeze credit plan that we'll be contending with as we move forward. This next page kind of looks at the various components of state aid, and the items in red are the things that changed upon adoption of the state budget. You can see that we received an additional $100,000 in foundation aid. That's been frozen for the last number of years. Building aid increased a little bit as well. That was due to holding back on adopting an assumed interest rate, which resulted in lower building aid for us previously, as you can tell. Excess cost aid, we saw a slight reduction in, about $325,000. That really was just probably updating the numbers to more actual data as the year went on. And the big item, again, is the gap elimination adjustment. Last year, we had $4.1 million in our gap elimination adjustment. That's the take back that the state applies to our state aid package. This year, they've replenished about 1.5 million of it. So we're still seeing about $2.5 million in gap elimination adjustment applied to our budget. So our state aid is increasing just over 4% this year. The other revenue items, we kind of refer to those as the local items. You can see they're very insignificant compared to the rest of the budget. Interest earnings, again, going down. And the other two big pieces of our budget are fund balance and property taxes. With the additional state aid that came upon the adoption of the state budget, we reduced our reliance on fund balance by about $750,000. So that next year, as we move forward, our starting point, it will be $750,000 less of a need on the fund balance. The property taxes is always the balancing factor, and we watch this very closely. We did use some of the state aid to reduce our property taxes as well, and the increase this year for the levy is 1.55%. This is the lowest tax levy increase we've had in about 12 years or so. I went back and did a little research on that. This next slide takes a look kind of graphically at where our state aid has been This takes out the building aid, which is kind of a separate computation. But you can see compared to 08-09, we're still about $1.4 million less than we were 6 years ago at this point. And to date, the gap elimination adjustment has taken away $30 million from our district. This 6-year history, you can sort of see the progression of both the budget increase and the tax levy. Again, we're at 1.72 budget increase and 1.5 in tax levy increase. The Proposition 1 slide shows our budget of $162 million. The tax levy cap calculation this year was 3.17%. That's that big long formula that the state mandates for us to complete. Our property taxes driven by the budget, again, 1.55%, so we've got some flexibility there still of 1.62%. We're about $1.8 million less than the tax cap. So Proposition 1 for next Tuesday's budget vote is voting on the amount of the budget, authorizing the board to expend $162.8 million. Proposition 2 is the bus replacement, cost not to exceed $2.1 million. Just a reminder, 60% of that is reimbursed from the state transportation aid, and that's replacing 21 buses at a cost of approximately 3.2 cents per $1,000 of full value assessment. Proposition 3 is the Board of Education, and I'll invite Kelly DeFisciani to come up and talk about the seats up for election.
We have 2 seats up for election this year. Each seat carries a 3-year term. One incumbent, Robert Pretzley, is running, and then 3 individuals seeking a first term, Christine Rajat, Karenza Ryback, and Samuel Hazelton. And I'm just going to read their bios that will be in the newsletter that you guys should be receiving shortly, like in the next couple days. Christine Rajat of Half Moon is seeking her first term on the board. She is currently employed as the Director of Development and Community Relations at Equinox, Inc. She has a bachelor's degree in communications journalism from St. John Fisher College. She is working toward a CFRE, certification for fundraising executives. She and her husband have 3 children who attend Shen. Karenza Ryback of Ballston Lake is seeking her first term on the board. She studied pre-med at Arizona State University. She and her husband have 5 children who attend Shen. Robert Presley of Rexford is the Vice President of the Board of Education and is seeking his 2nd term. He is currently employed as a commercial manager at Momentive Performance Materials and is a retired colonel from the U.S. Marine Corps Reserve. He has a bachelor's degree in systems engineering from the U.S. Naval Academy and a master's degree in public administration from the University of Oklahoma. He and his wife have 2 children who attend Shen. Samuel H. Hazelton V of Clifton Park is seeking his first term on the board. He is the owner and CEO of Efficiency Partners, LLC. He holds a bachelor's degree from the University of Albany in business administration. He and his wife have 5 children. 1 currently attends Shenendehowa and 4 have graduated. Are we going to call them up? If the 4 of you could just come up and we'll introduce you one at a time. Christine Rajat. And Karenza Ryback. And Samuel Hazelton. And then Bob Presley. And these are the 4 candidates running for the Board of Education on May 19th.
Thank you for doing it.
And just to wrap up our budget hearing, reminder, the budget is next Tuesday. It's the universal budget vote date for all schools. May 19th, we open the polls at 7 a.m. in the morning and we go through 9 p.m. at night. It's at the Guana Middle School gym. You must be 18 years or older, a district resident for the last 30 days. No pre-registration is required. Official photo ID is required upon voting. And just a reminder as well, the absentee ballots are available at the district clerk's office at 5 Chelsea Place. absentee ballots must be returned no later than 5 p.m. on budget vote day, which is May 19th. And of course, I want to remind everyone it's a crime to falsify your vote or vote falsely.
Thank you. I should say, I have questions about having a budget hearing. My definition of hearing is back and forth and the ability to change. And I don't know, how many, you and, Oliver, you and Kathy have been doing the road show. You've been out talking to a lot of groups, right? 40-some groups, I would imagine, right? That we've been out to. So this is another, in effect, another road show tonight. And at any of those, we take comments and questions as well. So we certainly would encourage that if anyone would like to raise a question or have a comment.
I have a question. I thought I was looking at the online version of the newsletter, and that also says that in order to be eligible to vote, you have to be a U.S. citizen.
Correct.
I didn't see that up there, but.
Yes, but that is correct.
Okay.
Any other comments, questions? If not, we'll conclude this hearing, and we'll move forward with adopting an agenda for our meeting. Can I have a motion? Todd, second. Jim? All those in favor? The agenda is adopted, and we'll move forward with Board of Education comments. Jim?
Thank you, Mr. President. I just have a couple of items. I did want to comment briefly on the budget. We've been working it for a number of meetings now, a couple of months for us and much longer for the professionals in the district. I think it's a good budget. I think it's a reasonable budget for us to put forward to our voters. I've made it a point to attend a number of the roadshow presentations, primarily on the outside of the district, the town board meeting, the Rotary meetings, but also the PTA Council, CODA Partnership, CODA PTA. And there haven't been a lot of comments because I think people realize that it's a very well-crafted budget in terms of the numbers and percentages, but those that I have heard have been very favorable. And in particular, what I have liked to remind people in order to put it in perspective is that the CPI inflation is running about 1.62, and we're right there in terms of our expenditure increase. Our tax levy increase is actually below that, and that seems to put it in perspective for people. The other item that I wanted to point out is just something I was verifying as Kathy was speaking. And in our fiscal accountability report, it lists the expenditures per pupil. And again, this budget reflects that our expenditures are about just under $15,000 per pupil, in spite of educating nearly 10,000 students every year. Compare that to about 20,000 to 21,000 across the state. So I think, in addition to being a reasonable budget for our taxpayers and voters, it's lean by comparison across the state, and it's another indication that we're doing things intelligently and efficiently, and I wholeheartedly support it. A couple of other things I just wanted to comment on. There's some others that I would like to comment on as they come up in tonight's agenda, but Mr. DeLallo, you received some kudos at the PTA Council meeting, and I promised to pass them on, so I didn't get a chance before now. One of the folks commented on your letter in the community news and was very complimentary of your having, felt the need to be accountable for words that you chose to use, and I just wanted to pass those on. So. Thank you. And finally, I don't know as Principal Karen Skarka is here tonight, but I just wanted to pass along. I was at a meeting with some homeowners, homeowners association last night, and they made me aware that Karen had reached out to that particular homeowners association because they're new to her area of the district, and they are, it sounds like they're going to be meeting on a regular basis. There's a lot of veterans in that particular group, and she has already invited them to help them celebrate Veterans Day in the fall. So great news there. And that's it for now. Thank you.
Todd?
Just two brief comments. Again, as Jim said, I'm proud of and I support this budget fully as well. The other part of it that Jim didn't mention was the sustainability of it. So we didn't put a budget together that next year we're going to be looking at doing something drastic the other way. This is something that we can live with for years to come, and that's important. And then the only other comment would be to, I think the people in the room here will probably be voting, but please encourage everybody you know to vote. For parents here that have students, or parents you know of that have students at college that are coming home that live here, all you have to do is be 18, so you have the ability to vote as well. So please vote.
Thank you.
Sure. I'm not going to repeat the comments about the budget, but I absolutely agree and look forward to hearing from the community next Tuesday. If I could just play catch up on a couple of comments I didn't make the last time, I wanted to acknowledge the mostly a cappella performance at Shenendehowa. What an incredible job they did, and I know they made a big impression in New York as well. And I also didn't comment on Arenda's annual 5th grade play, The Grunch, this year. Mr. Smith has a great sense of humor. He always manages to land a role that's certainly out of the ordinary, so it was great. I had the opportunity to be present when Shen was acknowledged as a CPR Smart School, and I was touched by the presentation and the enthusiasm of the students who demonstrated their skill and understanding of CPR, as well as the teacher who clearly made it a lesson that they would remember. So I wanted to recognize that. I went to the PTA Presidents and Principals dinner, and it was really, and Dr. Wood was one of the panelists there, among some other superintendents from different geographic areas and economic communities, really showed Shen in the best possible light. And one of the topics of conversation from another school district that I thought was very interesting for our purposes might be when we have parent nights or a need to communicate with parents, that be parent university for Shen, that there be a way for parents to feel like they're being educated as well. And we already do that. We do a lot of that, but kind of branding it as Parent U, I thought was a great idea. We had community conversations at Acadia. We have another one coming up on Saturday at Cheryl's Lodge. Is that the right terminology?
Yeah.
Okay. So looking forward to that. The Social Studies Department, World of Difference, and the Model UN clubs at the high school brought Watchers of the Sky to Shen. It was a really interesting and powerful film that told the story of Raphael Lemkin, who created the word genocide and used the law as a means to try and protect people from mass atrocities. And so, you know, it was an important message, and I found it important not just globally, but also in what we're experiencing throughout the United States as well. And I wanted to say thank you for the people who made that happen. And the executive producer of the film was there to answer questions and was really impressed with the number of students who were in the audience as well. So kudos to them. And to also Colin Palmer, who won the DAR History Essay contest. He's a middle school student. And I wanted to compliment the high school. If you haven't been in the front entrance of the high school lately, you walk in, there's a reception desk, and right behind it is an incredible art gallery. Such a nice way to showcase student work, and really, really attractive. So kudos to them. I'm done.
Thank you.
The art gallery is terrific, and it's been great having it there, so terrific. I'll just keep my comments brief. I won't reiterate what everybody else has as far as the budget, although I do feel compelled to say that
with all that was said about the budget, I thoroughly agree wholeheartedly, but the one thing that always speaks to me the most is that it provides for students. We are constantly moving forward. And that to me speaks of the commitment of the people who not only serve, but the people who we try to serve. And we are all interested in having a better system all the time. And that's the one thing I can say that 10 years ago, as we were sitting around a table interviewing Dr. Robinson, the board's hope at that time was that we would continue to be great. We would continue to get greater and greater. We wouldn't be happy with great. We would continue to strive for greater. And that's a moving target. And it's a moving target especially in light of financial restrictions and fiscal accountability and governmental interference, if you want to say, or guidance. But I think that the most important part of this budget is that we are doing more for our kids. And that, to me, is what we're here for. That's the bottom line for me, and I can't say how strongly I support not only this budget, but the people who make the budget work day in and day out. And I really beg for the people of this community to do their civic responsibility and get out and vote. Please don't assume that someone else is going to vote for you. We have to take the initiative, and we have to get out. And I really encourage you that if you have children, that you take them to the voting polls too, because that's where they start to learn the importance of having their voice heard. So I do thoroughly support the budget, and I look forward to budget vote night. In regards to that, I also want to thank the board recently for their indulgence in the last couple of meetings. I've struggled a little bit in February and March and April, with trying to balance a new lifestyle with my kids away and involved in other things, and the board, and they've been terrific as far as supporting me, and I just want you to know that I appreciate it. I followed everything that was going on, and I just want to thank my fellow board members for their indulgence. I also want to thank and congratulate the tenure and the tenure recipients and the retirees who the meeting I missed, who received those accolades. I'm always excited to see the tenure recipients because there's so much more ahead of them, and I'm always sad to see the retirees because there's so much institutional history that goes with them, and their experience and their expertise. We've had some phenomenal teachers and phenomenal teachers retiring this year, and I wish them the very best. I know that they won't stop teaching once they retire because I'm a firm believer in this. Once you're a teacher, you're always a teacher. So, as far as one other thing, I'd like to tell everyone about the Green and White Gala that's coming up on June 13th. It is the primary fundraiser for the Shen Educational Foundation, and if you're not aware of the Shen Educational Foundation, they are the foundation that funds all kinds of projects, programs, supports the district, things that fall outside the purview of the budget. Our one goal is to raise money and to give it back to the students and to the programs at the schools. So it really is something that, as a community, we should really be involved with. It's a great night. It's June 13th. We have music. We have live auctions. We have a raffle. We have some phenomenal sponsors this year that we will certainly recognize at a later date. And we would really like to see parent and community members coming and attending because it really brings the community together for one cause, and that's to do better by our kids. So June 13th, the information is available on the website, the district website, if you go to the Shen Educational Foundation, or you can get there by shenedfoundation.org. Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess I wasn't as short as I thought it was going to be.
Gary?
Earlier this afternoon, I attended the 25-year club recognition for those, excuse me, those Shenendehowa employees who have been here in the district for 25 years or more. And it's one of those events that I particularly like to attend. The opportunity to see, meet, congratulate them, and to participate in the celebration is really special. These people have not just become tenured teachers, but they have served another 22 years or thereabouts. They've served with distinction. They've dedicated their lives to our students, to the school district, and I believe they deserve every recognition that we can give them. As far as the budget is concerned, 14 years ago, I guess it was something like that. It'll be beginning of 15 years ago in June. When I came on this board, I had one real aspiration, and that would be that Shenendehowa would be better than it already was, that it would be a district of excellence. And of course, we've heard that excellence is not a destination, but a journey, and that's absolutely true. Unfortunately, for about the last 5 or 6 years, due to situations beyond our control, we kind of got detoured a little bit. I must say that as a consequence of the guidance of Dr. Robinson and the district leadership, as well as the participation of the board, our detour wasn't as far out as a lot of people had to go. We maintained a lot of things that other people had to just discard, not because they wanted to, not because they weren't valuable, but because they had no other choice. We didn't get to that point. Now we have an opportunity to start moving forward again, and as I've long said, I didn't get on this board to tear this district down. I got on this board to build it up, and we have a chance to do that, and this budget is a great one for doing that, the beginnings of it. There was one other comment, and you know I always like to comment about things outside of our district. I didn't have an invite to the recent gathering of the Board of Regents, but I did tune in for a couple of hours of it. I missed the first presentation, but I heard the presentation by the superintendents and the building administrators. And I marveled at the reality, how really good contact and touch they had with what makes things tick and how things would work if they were working right. And unfortunately, that is not what the Board of Regents, and more particularly our governor, has laid out for public education in New York. I've been highly critical of both our chancellor and of our governor as a consequence of his deformation of education. And I must acknowledge that at least of late, the chancellor has started to make sounds like she's beginning to get it, and maybe belatedly, but she seems to be paying attention. I only hope that the testimony that was given by the superintendents and the building principals will be taken to heart, and that the regents will do something with that, because I think they were given plenty of information that would allow them to construct things that would be constructive rather than disruptive and destructive. That's it.
Thank you, Gary.
Late last month, I got to participate in what I call my first high school East trifecta. It was 3 successive nights of doing things after school hours that add a lot to what we do, and this is above and beyond our budget. You don't see it in the budget. But on the 22nd, we had a college night. Not only our students, but students across the other districts participated. On the 23rd, we had a jazz fest. That was 2 hours of constant music, a professional musician who was brought in, joining our middle schoolers and our high schools in an awesome musical environment that I've never seen anything like that before. And on the 24th of Science Night, where again, a lot of other students from other school districts attended. This came about through a couple of unsung heroes, and that's our custodial staff. If you look at what we're doing with the most utilized building in the community, okay, not only are we teaching, but we're having these events, and they go without a hitch. Okay, everything seems to work, very clean, very safe. And I thought it was very appropriate at our 25-year recognition that we recognized employees like our custodians, one in particular from High School East, our bus drivers, the guy who fixes the phone, okay? These happen because of these workers, showing up, being part of our community, participating, and just doing whatever it takes to make things work smoothly. So my hat is off to those guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. I was going to mention as well, I've had a Kumbaya week here. Yesterday, Oliver and I participated in the dedication of the new softball scoreboard erected in honor of Deanna Rivers. It's really a terrific, probably a pun, it's going to be a long-standing tribute to her. Right out there in the field, other than the accident on the Northway, Saratoga eventually got here. I see Shen beat them yesterday, but it was just Deanna's parents and grandparents were there, and I talked to her grandfather, and he said, this has been tough, but he said, every little reminder where the community comes together, there's value in that, and he and her grandmother so appreciated that. So just sometimes we get pulling in different directions and, protecting our own turf. And this is one where people just came together. There were great donations. There were people who volunteered to do this, and it was a wonderful event. And I was glad that we were able to do it with a bunch of students there, seeing what was going on, see the honor that happened. And then we ran from that to a meeting where we discussed, one of the items was a Parents University. We're talking about how can we do a better job of collaborating. I think everybody is intent on communicating well. And sometimes, and I think we do it, but there are times when, as it was pointed out in our meeting, we had each of the unions represented, the administration, Bob and I were there from the board, PTA, who really have come up with the ideas. We're all out there trying to do the same thing, and there's sometimes we all need to know what the message is and be proactive. And one of the things that we talked about a lot yesterday, the meeting wasn't called to say, how do we deal with all this protest or opt-out thing, but okay, that's an issue out in the community. How do we deal with it? Can we be more proactive earlier in the year? Can the lady who's normally cleaning lady who's standing at the door bringing people in, can she know what the message is? Because that's the first touch point. It's when you were talking about these people in the schools, it's not only the teacher, but we have just a wonderful commitment of folks who want to help in that process. So we're going to try to meet every 3 to 4 times a year, and it was a very positive meeting. I was very encouraged by it. And then this afternoon I attended the 25-year presentation as well, and like you, Bob, I was impressed that it was across the board in terms of and the people who come back. It's not just the people getting the 25-year pin, but there are people there who taught with my wife when she got her 25-year pin in 1994, and they're there. They're retired a long time. They're back. They want to see their colleagues. They want to hear what's going on. It's a great way to recognize our staff. So anyway, that's my report. And we move to, we'll invite the Taylors up here, right, the students, who will give comments. And at the same time, I'll give the opening for residents' public comments. It's an opportunity for residents to address the Board of Education. I know I don't have to ask the question. There are residents in attendance. We will ask your name and address to confirm residency within the district and to use in the event of follow-up as necessary. That the board will not address specific comments. The board reminds residents that the public comment portion of our meeting is only one item on a long agenda. We therefore ask that each speaker be as succinct as possible and that remarks be limited to 2 to 3 minutes. We'd also expect that residents speak in a respectful and courteous manner so as to model proper civility and decorum for our students, and we'll do the same. Residents may also contact the board via email at boe@shenet.org. All questions come into the superintendent's office are shared with the board. Policy questions concerned are typically answered by the board president. Operational questions and concerns are typically addressed by the board president, and operational questions and concerns typically addressed by the superintendent. And we have the Taylors up here, right?
Right.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. We recently had another speak out at the high school run by the Senate, and it was very successful. It was on the school environment. We had some faculty and administration on board at the speak out. Sorry, I can't speak. And they were very receptive of students' ideas, and we are hoping that in the following years that we can implement some new policies based on some student opinions.
And also last week we actually had our last meeting with the old Senate, which was kind of sad for us, but that's okay. And this past Monday we had our first meeting with the new Senate, which of course meant that we had our nominations for next year's officers. So at our June meeting we will be introducing our next year's Board of Ed reps. So we'll have that for you next time.
Thank you. Can I just ask what our students are, if you don't mind sharing, what are your plans for next year?
Well, we had a lot of conversation on things such as
Well, we mean
Your
you
plan.
personally.
Oh, personally?
Yeah.
I'm going to assume.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Are we going to say Roger Williams?
Roger Williams University. Yeah, sorry about this. I had a crazy day.
No, that's great.
Yes, and I'll be
Congratulations.
studying forensic science and playing volleyball next year.
Good job.
Congratulations.
And I will be attending Barrett Honors College at Arizona State University to study biomedical science.
Excellent.
Congratulations.
Well, you guys have done a great job. Thank
you.
you so much.
Yeah, I just want to comment as you're leaving maybe I haven't been as aware of it in the past, but I'm really impressed with the number of and the seriousness of the speak out you held this year. I think it's a wonderful you provided a wonderful forum for certainly for students, but also for others of us in the community to hear what you're thinking. And I think you're right. The comments won't be ignored. And I think it shows some real maturity on the part of the students to be able to come in that environment and take the time, make a commitment to spend a period, because you do it like 4 periods over any day, and discuss serious subjects and have serious thoughts on them. So thank you.
All right, thank you.
At this point, I ask if any residents would like to speak. The microphone is up here.
I got this down to about 3 minutes. If I speak
Okay.
quickly. All right. I guess I'll start.
Yeah, go ahead. Oh, sure. If you introduce yourself, sure.
Okay. Evening, Madam Messrs. of the Board of Education and Mr. Robinson. My name is Christopher Getty. I reside at 20 Torrey Pines in Clifton Park. I'm the parent of a 3rd grader and 2 kindergartners at Carrigon Elementary. I'd like to take a couple of minutes of your time to discuss quantity and quality. An achievement that Shen applauds, and for good reason, is that 93% of classes are now at or below target size, which translates simply into a smaller number of students in each class. The fact is, and should be applauded for good reason, you do not need to be an advanced degree to know that smaller class sizes mean a better educational experience for your children. Unfortunately, as of April 30, 2015, Carrigon's 3rd graders will fall outside that 93% achievement yet again. I did not want to come here to focus on numbers which are stagnant and cold, but if you did, you would see that they have never, the 3rd graders at Carrigon have never been part of the 93%. From 1st grade on, my son's class has been at or near the maximum number of students, with him and his fellow students matriculating in the 4th grade. Both I and the parents that I have spoken with thought that along with learning more challenging intermediate level work, they would finally also be given the smaller class size that they deserve. On April 30, 2015, with little or no notice to parents and with a stroke of the superintendent's pen or possibly the digital format of that these days, Carrigon went from 4 sections of 4th grade to 3, destining my son to another year without relief from class sizes at the maximum number of students, which will be over the maximum in the event new students enroll in the Carrigon family. Further, there has been what I understand to be a non-traditional change in the administration of services to those students with additional needs, whereby they are being spread out among the remaining 3 classes. We've had little time to understand this change, or even less time for parents to react. Tonight I stand with other Carrigon parents to my left, and am speaking on behalf of others who were unable to be here but have had several questions and would like the Board of Education to address. Would the Board please explain and potentially reconsider whatever policy that resulted in the loss of the fourth grade section, along with the unconventional change in administration of help for students with additional needs? Can the Board look at whether the change in special services is merely an attempt to address stress class size on next year's fourth grade class? Can the Board look beyond simple numbers and see that quality education next year's fourth graders would receive if they were allowed to keep that fourth section, which is already in place? Can the Board make next year's Carrigon fourth grade part of this 93%? Now, Shen is ranked 653rd out of 669 school districts in New York State for cost of education per pupil. That means that there are only 16 districts in the state that educates its young people for less per pupil than Shen, an achievement. But that achievement must be balanced against the quality education that the students are receiving. I'd ask that the Board give this change that happened on April 30 further consideration. Respectfully ask that it report back to us with further information and potentially a more viable solution than simply requiring my child and his fellow students to continue to remain at maximum size classes at the expense of the quality education. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Christine Gordoya. I'm from Boston Lake, New York. Good evening, members of the Board of Education and Superintendent Robinson. Along with them, I'm a member, I am the mother of a third grader at Carrigon Elementary School who will also be affected by the decision made for next year. As mentioned earlier, my son has never had the benefit of being in a class that enjoys the target size student-to-teacher ratio, and with the decision to reduce the fourth grade to 3 sections, it appears the opportunity has been lost again. This is of a personal significance to my husband and I because our son is quiet and reserved, but has excelled academically when taught by a teacher who can take the time to recognize his needs and push him to do his best. We've already experienced a grade where he was just another student in a large class, and the difference in the quality of his education was obvious. I'm sure he's not the only student who would clearly benefit from smaller classes. I'd very much like it if the Board could please share with the parents the merits of the decision to eliminate one of the fourth grade sections, as I can see no benefit to the students of the incoming class as a result of this change. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Robinson and members of the Board of Education, my name is Jennifer Marin. I live at 26 Torrey Pines in Clifton Park. I have a daughter in 6th grade here at Gowanna and a daughter currently in 3rd grade at Carrigon. On Saturday, May 2nd, I received an email from the Carrigon PTA president notifying membership that the administration had decided to drop a section of 4th grade for the 2015-2016 school year. Projected class sizes for this grade level are currently at 25.7 students, or 26. While 26 students is still within the range for class size at this grade level, as set by the board, which are 21 being the minimum, 27 being the maximum, and 24 being the target. Clearly, 26 is not ideal. I can see that no sections are currently above parameters. However, my child's sections have always lingered at or near max levels. I have heard the following percentage thrown around at recent meetings on this topic. Excuse me. 93% of classes at Shen are in the target range for classroom size. While I applaud the district on this high percentage, my child is in the other 7% and has spent her entire time at Carrigon in that bubble range. I would ask this Board of Education to reconsider this decision. Research shows that children thrive in a smaller class setting, especially in the lower grades. Reducing class size, particularly at the elementary level, is one of the few educational strategies shown to increase learning. We constantly hear that we need our students to be college and career ready. This is even more of a challenge when we pack our classrooms with maximum numbers of students. Smaller classrooms provide for more in-depth study. In the current atmosphere of constant testing, children need more interaction with the teacher, which is provided with fewer students in the classroom. Another point to consider with this particular group of current third graders is the high percentage of special education learners. These students in particular will be lost in an overpopulated classroom. Currently, in my child's third grade classroom, there are 25 students, 9 of which have IEPs or individual education plans, 1 co-teacher, and 1 aide. I understand that support services are of the utmost importance to these learners, and I'm happy they are provided. I do, however, wonder about the kids who remain in the classroom where no new instruction can take place while groups of students are out of the classroom. I ask you the following questions. At some point, are we providing a disservice to those students who don't require special services? Is this the trend for Carrigan? What is the plan when this group gets to 5th grade? Excuse me. Will we lose another teacher? It is imperative that you reconsider this decision. I'm aware that recently another group of concerned parents spoke out about an issue important to them, and this board decided to reverse that decision and wait another year to further study the issue. I only ask that you provide us with the same considerations. Shen is fortunate to have a reputation to provide a high-quality education. That reputation needs to be upheld in this case. As board members and parents, I think that we can all agree that students need to be the priority. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. I'm Sam Hazelton. I live at 10 Twilight Drive. I have a daughter who's a junior and 4 kids have graduated. I have 2 quick questions tonight. One, and somebody else raised this question at the last board meeting that I was at, and I didn't hear the answer. It may have been answered at another time, but somebody asked the question, when talking about the budget, there's a fund, I forget the name of the fund, but there's a fund that I guess this year with some of the extra state money, we're going to bolster that fund, which is used to help even things out in future years where the revenues are lower. And somebody asked the question, well, how much is in that fund? And I never heard the answer, so I'm repeating that question. Okay. Second question is, one of the things in the budget was 18.5 full-time employees were added, and it's hard for me as a parent to put that number in perspective unless I have an understanding of the student population trends as the district sees them. And I'm sure you guys have studied that sort of thing, and I'm sure you have plenty of, but that would be helpful in helping to understand the budget and understand, whether or not we're moving in an appropriate direction, if I had an idea of what the student population trends were and were expected to be. So,
let me answer just part of that question, just because it's a very simple thing. When we talked about the budget and Kathy presented state revenue, in 2008, 2009, our state revenue was $37.5 million, and we had 9,869 students. In 2014-15, 2015-16 going forward, our state budget money is going to be $36 million, $1.4 million less, and we have 9,797 students. So, as you read about schools in the Capital District or across the state, and you see them all grappling with loss of students, we haven't. We've dealt with loss of funds, but we have lots of information. We hire somebody to do it every year, and we can supply a copy of that.
Right. Yeah, it's just a curiosity item for me to help me to understand it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
But that information is public.
Right?
Yeah,
it's public. I don't know if we have
the budget
talks
about a general fund. Okay, so that it's easily accessible if you were reading it, right? Okay.
Yep. So I think, any further comments or questions? Dr. Robinson.
Thank you very much. And before I offer some comments, I want to extend my thanks to the district office team. Even though Mrs. Wetmore presented a budget tonight, it's a tremendous, tremendous undertaking by a lot of people to put together a lot of pieces and present something that hopefully is logical to the voting public, and more importantly, logical to to our students and parents recognizing what we're trying to do. So I want to express my gratitude to those folks, because oftentimes the people behind the scene don't get acknowledged, and I certainly, the comments tonight about a 25-year club really triggered that to myself, to thinking how often we present these things but don't acknowledge those people who do a lot of the heavy lifting behind the scenes. And speaking of acknowledgement, I had two very contrasting encounters at the state level this past week. And I say contrasting. I was invited by Assemblyman Tedesco, who had the state assembly acknowledge the Shen boys basketball team along with the Scotia boys basketball team, both who were the state champions in their respective classes this year. And it was great to be there with the kids and to see them sitting on the floor of the state assembly. As I sat there in this very, if you've ever been in the state assembly, very powerful building that you often wonder, wow, who thought about constructing this? And certainly we won't be able to construct that again. And to watch the kids' faces and to see that they saw the importance of the moment. And so this is a resolution. Each one of the players received this from Assemblyman Tedesco, signed by him, as well as recognized by the State Assembly. And that was a powerful piece. Unfortunately, I had another meeting at 12:30 back in district that I had to rush back to, because they left that and went to the Senate. And if someone sent me an email, there's all these political newspapers that I don't necessarily subscribe to, but if someone who's a real political animal who subscribed to all this email said, the first time, and this person literally said, the first time in their 25 plus years of reading this newspaper, this was the first time a school district was mentioned. And it's basically say who are the winners and losers in this week's state politics. And the Shen basketball team was the loser. And I was thinking, why are you sending me this to hurt my feelings? I already have enough people trying to do that. But when you start reading it, it said it was so unfortunate that the Shen basketball team and also Scotia had to witness probably one of the more I'm going to say unfortunate displays of politics when members of the Senate, Democrat, walked out of the chamber. So the kids were not able to be recognized similarly in the Senate because of the recent situation. Well, former Majority Leader Skelos, now Senator Skelos. So I just thought it was such an interesting contrast. But for the kids, it was also a tremendous learning experience, because the whole time they're up against the glass watching this thing unfold in front of their face, essentially watching history unfold, and to later on understand what was happening. So while they didn't get the acknowledgement like this, I think they received probably one of the better life lessons, in the sense that, you know what, when you play the game right, when you play the game fairly, you can hold your head up high. And when you don't, unfortunately, bad things happen. So I think it was a tremendous lesson for the kids. So I really wanted to share that with the board, because oftentimes, people hear about, kids winning championships, but sometimes we don't realize the significant lessons that comes with that. So it was a tremendous learning, teachable moment for those kids. The second piece, and Mr. DeLallo alluded to, and I won't necessarily go through it, but as I sat there, most people know I'm somewhat impatient and have poor joints, and so I can't sit too long any places. But I literally sat in a room for 9 hours, and the whole time I'm sitting there thinking, like, wow, I could almost been flying to London right about now, and took 13 pages of notes. And it was the summit, the Learning Summit, the Board of Regents sponsored, to hear from various constituency groups regarding the APPR evaluation process for teachers and principal. And I won't necessarily go through the 13, in fact, I won't go through many of the notes at all. I'll take this more so for my edification than not. You heard from the superintendent's group, which was the first group to start, and kudos to colleagues who presented, because I think it set a certain tone that the purpose of being here was to be instructive, to be informative, and not to necessarily come and talk about all the things that's going wrong, versus just really try to make sure that we don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, that we really think about the things that's going well, some of the quality experiences that the evaluation process has brought to the table as we look to modify. We heard from the principals group, who's a silent partner in this relationship, and I say silent because most of the protests you hear about evaluation is about teacher evaluation, but the same evaluation system structure that applies to teachers also applied to principals. So it was good to hear from that group. Heard from teachers. And kudos to teachers that the sentiments were one of how do we continue to do some things different, how do we continue to do some things well. You heard from parents. The parents group were well represented. Again, very common themes. You heard from School Board Association on behalf of school board members. So you had a tremendous cross-section, and as I sat there, the thing that really puzzled me was I kept saying, my God, I wish we would have had this conversation 6 months ago before our legislative leaders decided to take it on their own to decide education policy without even understanding the implications of the decisions that they're taking, because guaranteed if people would have had an opportunity to hear all the respective stakeholders, we'd have had a different, and I would say a better decision than the one that we're dealing with right now. And so it leaves us right now in a very precarious position, when I say us, school district, state, otherwise, because we have a law that we need to comply with. And unless and until that law changes, it's going to be a mediocre outcome at best, because simply the time constraints don't allow us to do the quality job that we need to do. And so I share that with you because with all that being said, I still think that there's some opportunities to really look at things differently and try to play within the very tight time constraints that we have and move on, because to complain only gives us a quick temporary sense of relief, but the reality of it is that we have good teachers, we have good administrators, we have a supportive Board of Education, we have a community and we saw tonight, people who are willing to stand up and express their thoughts. And all those things make us who we are. And so hopefully from all this, we'll become better of it. So it's just interesting to be there. And I'm looking forward to seeing what the Board of Regents is going to come out with. They're supposed to have a decision by mid-June. So we'll see what that looks like. But there's some interesting thing. And one last thing I want to talk about, because something that one of the groups noted, and I'm not sure if it was the teacher group, actually was a comment by the teacher groups, that they spoke about, because we're so focused on using technology differently. And they focused on the whole notion of how can we use video much more as a part of our evaluation process. And we have some very, very powerful examples of that right here within our classroom right now. And I'm just going to highlight one teacher in particular. We have a math teacher who actually videotapes, and Mr. Gilbert mentioned that it's a powerful tool, not only from an evaluative perspective, but it's a powerful instructional tool in terms of sharing those kind of things. And so I'm hoping that those kind of creative things will become a part of this evaluation process, that the focus is on improving and not simply proving what we have done versus continuously improving what we're doing. So it's interesting dynamics, and we're watching that to see how things translate. And that's probably going to be the next big thing to happen in education, because that impacts assessments, how we're going to go with assessments. And from our budget piece of it, all the things that we're trying to do, I think, align very well with the direction, what we hope, in the direction in which we hope the state will be going. So I just want to offer those two things, and certainly, again, kudos to the basketball team for their tremendous recognition, and also to Assemblyman Tedesco. He organized it, and his timing was good. They didn't walk out, so kudos to him as well. So, thank you.
Well, we'll move on to information items. We received claim audit reports. Anybody have any questions on this? Kathy, anything you need to say about it? Pretty straightforward.
I think there was one question about Hope House, I think it was.
I think you answered.
I think I answered, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I just had that question about the checks. And I've had this
number of
question
voids.
since I started. Is it a printing issue?
Some of it's a printing issue. We've have had more issues with our printing, but also when they print a check that has a lot of invoices on it, it requires more than one check stub to submit with a payment. So it often uses more than one check for a particular disbursement, so that you can itemize all of the invoices on the check stub.
Okay.
And of course, there's voids because of errors periodically as well, too.
The question is on the voiding of checks, always.
Yes.
Right,
Yeah.
the number of voids.
Great,
And-
because I asked.
And I would say one of the previous audit committee members had asked for a reconciliation because it lists how many disbursements versus the check range, and she wanted a reconciliation of those numbers. So that's always been provided as an explanatory note since then.
And on the printing side of it, for those that are due to printing, is there a plan in place to
Well, we're changing software July 1, so that will certainly impact that process.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, Mary?
I'm curious about the composition of the audit committee coming to the end of the year now. Are you in need of additional kind of community members, or
We are in need of an additional member. Todd sits on the committee. We also have a community member that sits on the committee. We have had a vacancy, so we would be interested in an additional member.
And typically try to someone with some kind of financial background.
That's correct.
Because that's the benefit of being.
Most times it's presentations by auditors at the committee meeting, so it's helpful for someone to have some audit background.
not me otherwise?
And the next item is the minutes of the audit committee meeting. Todd, you were at that meeting.
Yes,
Yep,
yeah.
Yep.
That I was 100% fine.
Yep. Any questions on that? Mrs. Carmen, first reading.
Good evening. Tonight we have a few policies for first reading, and I'll start off with each one and see if you have questions. The first one, 5684, is threat assessment. This is a brand new policy that we're looking to adopt, and this policy will really provide the framework for our threat assessment protocol that we are looking to implement in the district for next school year. Questions?
Questions?
7243, military recruiters, access to secondary school students and information on students. There was a minor update with the letter to provide some clarification regarding that.
I just had a comment, not a question on that. Obviously, anything with the word military in it catches my eye. And I'm reminded, it's not so much on the policy itself, but I'm just reminded of that it's important for our high school students, I think, to see that not only do they have the responsibility of protecting this nation going forward, but also there's a tremendous amount of opportunity for them through the military itself, enlistment, or the various commissioning sources, the ROTC, the academies, and so forth. And I was reminded of it, so I thought I would mention it. Thank you.
Yep. The next one, 7513, administration of medication, I'm sorry. And the policy, there was really no noted changes. It was mostly in the guidelines for administering regulation where the changes took place there.
Any questions, comments?
And the last one was 7680, independent evaluation, educational evaluations. Just a couple minor changes you see on the policy to the wording, and then the regulation, the only thing that was changed was the amount that would reflect the increased cost for evaluations from $1,800 to $2,000.
Thank you. So these, just so people know, a reminder, we looked at this as a policy committee and have recommended these come for first reading. Thank you.
Thanks.
Consent items, the treasurer's report. Can I have a motion to accept the treasurer's report? Todd, second. Bob? Any questions? All those in favor? We have minutes from April 14 and April 21st. Can I have a motion to accept them? Could I separate them? Yes, I can. So can I have a motion for April 14, 2015 minutes? Jim, second. Bob? Any questions? All those in favor? The minutes of April 21st, 2015, can we have a motion on those? Jim and Bob, comments? Mary, did you have?
The correction is there. I'll abstain from the vote
Okay,
because I was absent.
All those in favor? Motion's carried. We move to action items, student placement. Mrs. Miles.
Yes, hello. I have the recommendations from the Committee on Preschool and School Age Special Education for 2014-15 and 2015-16.
We have a motion to adopt that. Mary, second. Bob, any questions? All those in favor? Thank you. Staffing recommendation, Mrs. Bush.
Good evening. We have one retirement recommendation tonight. Karen Domsky will be retiring at the end of the school year
She's worked for us for 10 years. She's at Octay as an elementary classroom monitor. And one of the resignations, Michelle Sow, class assistant principal at the high school, has received a promotion. Sad to see her leave. She's going to be going to Averill Park, if you accept the resignation.
What's she going to do at Averill?
She's going to be the principal of the high school.
Is she?
Can I have a motion? Janet, second. Jim, any questions? Comments? All those in favor?
Thank you.
Move on to business affairs. Kathy? We have a recommendation for appointment of Chief Inspector of Election and Inspectors of Elections. Janet, second. Gary, any questions? We can still find these people?
Yes. Just, and
Yeah.
that was really my thing. People volunteer, I know they get paid for it, but this is a pool of volunteers that are available on that particular day and have some training.
Correct.
And so forth. Okay.
Many of them come back every year, so.
And just to interject, interesting enough, I'm not sure it applies to schools, but for municipal elections and votes, if you're 18, you can be an election inspector, and we'll be having someone from the Saratoga County Board of Elections coming to, at some point, to our participation in government course, which is a senior course, which most kids are close to 18, if not 18, to see if they want to, when they're back home, to serve as election inspectors for municipal elections. So I say it because I'm not sure if the innate conflict of being a student in the school. So we're looking into that too, because what we're seeing now, we're seeing something we're aging out with our election inspectors. And so I share that with the board because at some point we may see a lot more younger names than more of our more veteran names on this piece. So it's an interesting piece we're trying to investigate.
Any other questions or comments? All those in favor? Motion carries.
It's a long day. Thanks for that.
Excuse me?
It's a long day for them.
It's a long day,
Appreciate
it is,
that.
yes, yeah. And they do it with a smile on their face.
They do.
Motion, we need a motion for accept bids for physical education supplies, healthcare supplies, and electrical supplies. Can I have a motion? Gary, second. Bob, any questions on that? All those in favor? We have a change order with McGillicott, $35,000. Actually, that's a credit to us, right?
Yep.
It's coming the right way. Jen? We'll take the 35,000 over here. Can I have a second? Todd, any questions?
Could I just ask, how did it come to be that they didn't do the work and that we could? Was that deliberate or intent?
I mean, we constantly are repairing things as we go along, and sometimes it just requires us to address some issues that maybe would have been in the capital project.
That's great.
So we do find every once in a while that we're able to manage to get a credit.
That's great, thank you.
Could I lump the next two items together? Extension of contract with Deer Oaks, the EAP provider, and...
I'm sorry, do you want us to vote on that one?
I'm sorry. All those in favor? Yes. Yeah, we want to get that money, right? So can we lump items 4 and 5 together? Extension of the agreement with Deer Parks, the EAP provider, and the intermunicipal agreement with Bustar 3 on internal auditing services. Janet, motion? Second. Jim, any questions or comments? All those in favor? Scholarship and local grant donations. Can I have a motion? Todd, second. Jim, any questions? With
Gratitude.
With gratitude, deep gratitude, right? Yes. All those in favor? Thank you. We have a service agreement with Johnson Controls. Could I have a motion on that? Jim, second. Janet, any question? Did you have a question, Jim?
I did, but it's been answered, and it was just, whether this was susceptible to competitive bidding. I made the assumption that these were some specialized services or equipment, and it sounds like they are, so they would receive an exemption.
All those in favor? And finally, we have land sale RFP resolution. Could I have a motion on that? Janet, second. Jim, any questions or comments? Do you want to say anything about that?
This has been years in the making. And what the RFP does now is, in fact, probably tomorrow I'll be in touch with Dave Rowley, who's our attorney handling this, to actually, the document that the board received several weeks ago, to actually get that quote unquote out on the street, so to speak, to potential bidders. From us, at this point, the process is turned over to our attorney. So there's no comments by any of us to potential bidders, because we don't want to create something may look as a conflict of interest or otherwise. So I'll let you know in Friday Bulletin specifically what the next steps in terms of the advertisement of it will be, so you'll know exactly when it's out there in case someone asks, where is it, how can we get access to it? We'll have those questions answered for you hopefully by Friday.
Thank you.
I'll just add something
Yes.
too.
Sure.
I wanted to just make mention, it's been a long process, as Dr. Robinson said. This is a key piece of property in the town, in the Exit 9 area, for a number of different reasons, not only for us, but I think the community as a whole. I realize that, it's a very valuable piece of property, and that the town board ultimately will have some control over what happens there. Obviously, we're hoping to maximize its value to the district, so we can enhance our programs even more. But I would also like to see, and I think that will be considered by the town board, that there continue to be some type of trails in there with all the wetlands and so forth. I would imagine that would be part of any development there. We don't have that kind of control to insist on that, obviously. But going forward, I think it's a great move for the district, and I'm looking forward to seeing what comes in.
Yeah, good. It's about 34 acres that we're talking about selling.
Yes.
So, yeah. It's been in the district hands since, I think, 1973 or something like that. And we built Oranjan and Shattuckon on the property, but at this point, it's surplus to us. Did we vote on it?
No.
All those in favor?
We were ready to jump
Yes,
on
we
that.
were ready to step on that. Okay, back, Mrs. Garman.
Policies for second reading. Do we have any questions regarding them?
Well, we should get a motion first.
Motion? Yeah, motion, yeah. Second. Todd, any questions? Jim?
I do. And this is on the video part. My understanding from the background reading was, obviously we have two different types of video recording or surveillance in the buses versus what's in the buildings and grounds. And I understand from the bus part that because of the limitations of the system that we're going to be using there, that those tapes, if you will, in old verbiage, I know it's digital stuff, but will be reused constantly, but yet we're able to preserve some of those items, the clips that we feel are necessary, in a storage facility of some type for an indefinite period, and that our policy is saying that period will be 3 years or until people that are in there are at least 21 years old. So going to the system that's being used for the buildings and grounds, are we going to also utilize a same processing system where we take clips and store them long-term on a larger system?
No, only because the difference between the buses is a very targeted, confined. The surveillance piece, for instance, the parking lot surveillance, that it runs and it, how could I say, kind of recalibrate itself after a period of time. And right now, we haven't tried anything because we haven't had the need to go back beyond 30 days, but we know that 30 days is feasible, doable in terms of the cycle, how things cycle through, and that's how the surveillance systems are designed. So we don't necessarily archive parking lot videos. It depends on how many, and it's all movement. So if it's still, there's nothing being captured, versus if there's a lot of movement, it captures a lot of things, therefore it cycles through faster. So there's certain instances where the cycling is much more intense than other areas where it's not, and so, but in our high traffic areas, such as entrances of high school, for instance, probably most high volume area, we know that we can recall all the hallways of high school. We can recall for about 30 days with the current system that we have. So it's not designed to archive the way the system, because otherwise we couldn't store all the stuff that's.
Right. No, I understand that, but I mean, and it's the same limitation in the bus system, but apparently there we're going to take clips and store them long term.
But that's not the plan for the surveillance pieces.
Can we do it?
I'm not saying we can't, but that's not the plan. I don't know that question. I'm sure that, if anything, it probably, I mean, we capture clips now and look back at things and do the slow walk when we're trying to investigate things. But it's not designed for that. It's designed for what it is in case if an incident occurred, for us to go back between one time period to another time period and see who was there. So it was designed for a more of an investigative tool of a particular situation than a time log or timestamp for perpetual. That's not the intent of it.
And then just the last thing, then does this upgrade of our video capability lend an opportunity to perhaps upgrading our Board of Education camera system?
Well, that's
where we can do the same thing.
Completely separate entities. So answer is no first, but then there's a yes piece of it because we're looking right now at some other video capacity that we'll use for instructional purposes and other purposes that we hope that capacity can be used to upgrade the system that we use here. And even today, Mrs. DeFisciani just went live, total behind the scenes that as a board member or public you never see it. But for instance, we used to have what we call a relearn tube, is where we store, if you go on the board link now, you see all the videos, and you click on it, you go to this hour learn. But we have changed that now. We're going to go, everything's going to be stored on YouTube, a simple YouTube board, YouTube piece of it, which allows us to store things in whole versus the individual click. You kind of go to one place and see all of them at the same time, and then you kind of pick and choose. So that's a change in even how we store things, but we will have some point, we hope, knock on wood, a different system, because the system we have now was great when we first started it, but it's generations old in terms of how technology is going. And we're looking into some other capacity to even do what I mentioned before tonight about videotaping in classrooms and making those things easier. So once you videotape it, it's gone. It goes to where it needs to go, and Kelly doesn't have to spend 3 or 4 hours tomorrow, maneuvering things to place it in the right place, which is quite frankly not the best use of time. So eventually we will have a different structure for the board, but nothing to do with our surveillance system or nothing to do with our bus system. Even our bus system and our surveillance system are completely different systems because they're designed for different purposes.
And Jim, we did ask the committee that Mary's chairing, the subcommittee of the board, looking at our communication thing, to look at the equipment side here in terms of predictability and accountability going forward.
All right.
We need a motion. Do we have a motion on this?
Yes, we have.
We have a motion, okay. Any questions, any additional questions? All those in favor of the policies, thank you very much. There's an opportunity for additional public comment. Any resident who would like to comment at this time is invited forward. Seeing none, as we move to adjournment, I do want to call out, we have talked about the vote a week from today, but I think on Thursday night at 7 p.m., there is a candidates forum that's coordinated by the Shenendehowa Teachers Association, and that will be in High School West in the auditorium. So I encourage people to attend that. With that being said, could I have a motion for adjournment? Second, Jim. All those in favor? Meeting's adjourned. Thank you all very much.